Hi, my name is David. I also go by Gant online, and I wanted to do an adventure review of Fabien's Atelier since my players just recently finished completing it. It is in the Wyvern Songs adventure compilation written by Brad Kerr, who also wrote the very popular Demon Driven into the Maw adventure, which I haven't played. So this is my first time delving into Brad's work, and yeah, I just wanted to get into how that went. So I have kind of the strict time records over on my left here of what my players did. That's going to keep me a little bit oriented, but yeah, I'll just jump into it. He suggests that the adventure comes after his other adventure called Hideous Daylight. It's not required, but it does kind of feed into that one. So I have never played Hideous Daylight and wasn't doing that. What Fabien's Atelier is essentially just a floating wizard island. I just put it in the middle of my map in my overland adventure with not really any explanation needed. The island is kind of shutting down or damaged and about to, fall out of the sky in the state that the players stumble upon it. So the island is supposedly always has invisibility on, and the players are supposed to just stumble upon a shimmering invisible staircase. I had it so that the island and staircase, the entirety of it, was kind of flickering in the distance as a result of the failing engine of the island, which is in turn powered by an imprisoned djinn, which definitely plays a big part in the adventure and did for my players as well. So they're kind of on their way from town to town and stumble across this flickering staircase that leads up to this small 100-foot diameter puck-shaped island. So of course they go up to investigate it, and well, maybe not 100 feet, maybe more 200 feet. So they drop everything they're doing, park their horses and retainers in the nearby tree line of the forest, and begin their ascent to the top of the dungeon. So it takes 2 turns to climb the stairs, according to Brad, and they reach the top, and at the top there is Fabien himself, who is dead in the yard, and apparently his death is explained in the previous module, Hideous Daylight, although the suggestion, if you hadn't played that, is just that he's died of natural causes, which I went with. My players didn't approach the body. In fact, they didn't really even inspect the body. They were aware of it, but for some reason they thought he was sleeping, and I did not do anything to telegraph or indicate that he was sleeping. It was pretty obvious from just the state of this old guy just lying in the grass that he was, dead, at least in my opinion. But I guess they kind of inferred that perhaps he was just napping in the afternoon sun and was unaware that his secret floating island was flickering and, the power was failing. So they kind of skirt around him, trying not to wake him up, as it were, and approach the atelier itself. Eventually, the kind of rear guard of the group walks by the corpse, and I explained to them that it is indeed a corpse. It's Fabien himself. He's dead. So they don't know it's Fabien yet, but they proceed into the main entrance room of the atelier, after which follows quite a long discussion about what their purpose on the island is. A couple of my players are very much aware that the OSR kind of goal, or this old school gaming goal, is to get treasure and money so that they can level up. But there's some conflict there because they don't know who Fabien is. They don't know who, this dead guy is. They don't know who this building belongs to. They don't want to mess with something that is beyond their power level. They were about level 2 to 3 at this point in our campaign. So it takes them a while to kind of discover, talk about what really their goal is here, and so they just begin collecting information from the start. And there's a lot of information to collect. Just full disclosure, this is quite a well-written module. I really enjoyed it. It's not very standard, and I think that's fine. It is really a perfect kind of just drop into your sandbox type adventure. There's a lot of campaign implications that can come from it, and there's a lot of just character and magical stuff and cool things. And it's heavily puzzle themed, and none of the puzzles are like stupidly difficult or just solved with a dice roll. Like they're all quite well thought out puzzles. To me, like I think to more experienced players, this wouldn't necessarily be classified as a puzzle dungeon. It would probably just be classified as a regular dungeon, because good dungeon design just has those elements that you pick up and then, along the way and then utilize later. Anyway, so they go into the rotunda. They immediately figure out that from looking at the doors, that the toucanet's beak is a keyhole for this east door. And they briefly attempt to pick the lock on the control room, which the statue animates and tells them not to do that, so they refrain from doing that. They do look into the kitchen where the fire and ice elementals are battling and almost get slapped by one of those before retreating. And they're not able to, the fire and ice elementals are too large to leave that room. So they don't really get a grasp of what's happening in there, other than that it's a kitchen and there's a battle going on. The 3 dream gremlins that spawn in this room, that they're like 2 inches tall, that happens. The dwarf, a newer player from the party, immediately runs over and I think just attempts to block their path, at which point they kind of start attacking him, which of course doesn't do any damage because they're 2 inches tall. So they start wailing on his boot, at which point he just kicks them clean across the room. So that's their first interaction with that. And there is clues to learn there if you don't kill them or just let them kind of proceed to where they're marching to. So it takes them a while to find this little mouse hole in the northwest part of the room, but they do later figure that out. So first thing they do is go into the room number 3, where the cabinet that turns things from small to large and large to small, as well as a temporarily miniaturized sleeping dragon. Brad has written this night dragon named Equinox, who is sleeping in a small dollhouse, a guest of the now dead Fabien, on top of a shrunken treasure hoard. So the players decide to immediately attempt to capture and subdue the dragon, which is very poor thinking on their part, and is going to lead to some hilarious outcomes in this campaign later on down the line. Little do they know, because of what happens. But so they have this hammock of smothering that they use to wrap up the dragon. They get some rope around its snout, and with kind of just wrestle it into submission. They tie its mouth closed so it can't cast spells. And because they see that it's trying to cast a spell, they win initiative and then muzzle it and hog tie it, essentially. They didn't even give it a chance to talk. They just immediately attacked it from sleeping so that they could take its 5,000 gold pieces treasure hoard. So they tie it up and stow it in the dwarf's backpack for now, which is a very ballsy move for a little dragon. I mean, I suppose there's really no way to know that it could. That's not true. There's some pretty obvious hints that it is going to probably return to its normal size at some point. However, they never really grasped that, even upon completing the adventure. but they will find out eventually, as I'll get into in a bit. So they take its 5,000 miniature treasure hoard. They very quickly discern the purpose of the cabinet just purely based off of the description. So like the wooden ramps. Very good telegraphing from Brad here. They enlarge the treasure hoard and leave it in the room, in that room for now, and take a turn to count all the gold. One thing that I want to mention here for the wandering monsters for this dungeon, there aren't any. What there is instead is an advancing the clock mechanic, which is very well done. It's actually a really, really fun aspect of the adventure. And I was really impressed with it and had a lot of fun utilizing it. And I think that it is a better, like for something like this, it is a better constraint / resource drain than wandering monsters. Just the fact that they're in the sky on a floating island that is going to fall eventually is very entertaining from a referee standpoint. And I think they felt that tension as well. Immediately upon entering the toucan, it gives a warning that the island is going to crash. So there is that time pressure. However, I believe I must have rolled at least 10 to 20 D6s, and in that first session, I didn't once indicate that the clock actually advanced. And I was using an electronic dice roller, so it was truly random. And this took us 2 sessions to complete, and it wasn't until halfway through the second session of play that I actually finally rolled a 1 and these advancing the clock mechanics started to take place. And so that was a little weird, but this last mechanic, number 3, which we'll get to later, actually had a huge impact on the result of the adventure, unexpectedly for sure. It was kind of I doubt this has happened to anyone else that has played this module. So moving on from there, now that I've explained that, just so you're aware that there aren't any wandering monsters really. I forgot, they actually silenced the dragon, and that's how they got it to stop casting spells. They had a magic item from a previous adventure, actually my adventure, the Flames Witnessed a Temperance, called the Iridescent Rod, that creates like a silence orb. They used that to silence the dragon. And while I'm going on tangents, I'm going to quickly talk about the Flames Witnessed a Temperance and how it relates to this module, in not only a theme, but also in content, because this is a floating island with a wizard who is dead. My adventure that I wrote is an island in the ocean about a wizard that is sleeping, and there are very similar. I would say mine is less. This is better for sure. Brad's is much better. Although mine is still worth a play and a download. It is free after all, so if you'd like to check it out, please do so. It's how I started my players off in this campaign. It was a really fun start to a campaign, a very soft start as well, because it's kind of a dream world scenario, so there's not a whole lot of consequences to death unless you want to incorporate some sort of attribute loss or something like that. However, not only the themes of the magical wizard on an island is interesting, but there's actually a really easy connection, because in the Flames Witnessed a Temperance, the wizard Proust is being assailed by some unnamed rival magic user that is causing his slumber to be his waking up to be delayed, because he's sent his sentient rat familiars to Proust's island, the Temperance, in order to clog his alarm clock machine, which is a very elaborate contraption. Now, and I named the rat familiar Nima. So that's my module. In this module, there is not only the same theme of the machine is clogged and causing a catastrophe, because that's what has happened here. The engine is clogged and it's caused a catastrophe. But Fabien also coincidentally happens to have a rat familiar. Now, its name isn't Nima, because that would be ridiculous. This came out much before The Flames Witnessed a Temperance. But its name is Callan. Where is it? Calendula. Is Fabien's rat familiar. So what I did is I just changed Calendula's name to Nima and made Fabien the previously nameless rival magic user that was causing Proust to not be able to wake up. So now Fabien is dead as a result of his own, unnatural, untimely death. But the fact that I was able to make that connection was really cool for me, discovering that I was able to do that. And really cool for my players once they figure it out, because there's a scene where they inevitably run into the sentient rat familiar. And, I describe there, it's actually a dwarf in a dark tunnel. He comes across him. There's no light, but the rat familiar recognizes the dwarf's voice because they interacted in that first adventure. And then eventually they figure it out that it's Nima. And though they were enemies then, now they're trying to help Nima because they want the island for themselves. Nima doesn't necessarily know they're being that selfish, but so they actually ally and take on these dream gremlins. So it's a very interesting, really cool turn of events that I was able to do there. And these modules complement each other quite well thematically. Although, again, I will reiterate, Brad's is, in hindsight, much more well done and has more content than mine does. And then The Flames Witness at Temperance does. Although The Flames Witness at Temperance is still worth checking out because it is free. And the craziest thing about this is I had not read Wyvern Songs or Fabien's Atelier until 2 weeks ago. So the fact that these modules linked up, and I didn't even necessarily realize that they worked so well together until, I had already chosen to incorporate this in my campaign. So I just thought that was really neat coincidence. And moving on after that long tangent. So they go up to the mezzanine above the rotunda. So there's like a bunch of books on the second floor of the main room. They search the shelves and they immediately find a map of the Atelier. So I get my players' grid paper and I draw out the map, including the smaller passages on the map, so they're able to fully see the extent of the room, as well as of the entire dungeon, rather, the entire structure. And then the dwarf, the carefree dwarf, the player really wanted his character to die, and he hasn't yet, but almost has killed many other characters as a result of his negligence. He runs over to these two buttons on a pedestal and just presses the buttons without reading the labels, and which was a very funny moment in play, and falls out of the island. There's like a fire pole that extends from the island to the ground, magically, formed shimmering pole, and he falls down the hole. He makes his save to grab the fire pole, otherwise it would have, tumbled to the earth and died instantly upon hitting the ground. But he does make that. And the dwarf was the one with the dragon with Equinox stuffed in his bag. So he lightens his load before his long crawl back up to the island to join the rest of the party. He drops the hog-tied dragon, miniaturized dragon, Equinox, back with the retainers and horses that are waiting at the base of the island, hidden in a tree line. At this point, in a previous session, I had rolled that there would be a bandit encounter during their overland travel. And this is about the time of day that would have happened, because it's about noon at this point in the game world. and they had set out quite early on in the day. So it's roughly right around the time where there would have been a bandit encounter. So I rule, and this is right about the time as well where we take a break between sessions. So I rule that the bandits see Casper the Dwarf slide down this flickering pole down from a flickering island, and that's very obvious and interesting to them. So they see that happen. They watch him walk over to the tree line, and they can easily spot where the rest of the retainers, the parties, stay behinds, are camping or hiding out. They see him drop off a bag and ascend the stairs. Now, of course, the bandits are men of opportunity. So they approach the hiding, to now visible to them retainers. The NPC group, right? There's no players in this group. Players have no idea this is going on. I determine all of this between the sessions. And I roll for it, of course. So I roll for surprise. I roll for hear noise. I roll morale for the players, retainers, the NPC group. I roll for the bandits to notice the dragon, the hog-tied dragon, like wriggling around. So they manage to sneak up on them. They manage to immediately gag the elf, so he can't cast any spells, although he actually didn't have any memorized. So it wasn't a problem anyways. It's 4 versus 3, 4 bandits, 2 retainers, and a torchbearer. The elf and it was actually a knight, or not a knight, but a squire, a level 1 knight, retainer, both had abnormally high loyalty scores. They each had 9 loyalty, and they actually both failed their morale/loyalty checks. They both, I think I rolled for both of them together since it was the same number. So they got a 10, and because of that, pretty much just immediately gave up the horses, which are the primary thing that the bandits wanted to steal from what they had seen there, as well as the hog-tied dragon, which the bandits, thought their leader might be interested in or whatever. I'm actually having those bandits be a part of the, I can't pronounce the name, but I think it's Coskeaton, which is a fortress in the module The Hidden Serpent, which is by Jeff Sparks. I haven't played it yet. I've read it. I plan to play it soon, which is why I've incorporated these bandits. So they've essentially stolen the players' horses and the dragon, Equinox, from Fabien's Atelier. What nobody really knows is that the miniaturized dragon is going to return to his full size 24 hours after being removed from the Atelier, as the size changing magic wears off outside of the actual Atelier itself. So when that happens, the dragon is absolutely going to kill all of those bandits, eat the horses, and then go on an invisible hunt for the player characters that have stolen his treasure hoard of 5,000 gold pieces. I think what I'm going to do then to weave that into the next module is have him not only ask for the 5,000 gold pieces back, but also an additional 5,000 gold pieces, and to secure the bandit's hideout, Coskeaton, for his own lair. So he'll have the players essentially clear the lair for him because he doesn't want to do it. He's a lazy dragon, or he'll kill them. And the reason that he knows about the lair is because he has the ESP spell. He was able to read the bandits' thoughts, or perhaps he heard them talking about it as they were on their way back there, whatever. So he knows the general location. So that's essentially what's going to happen in order to seed that next adventure. But just an example of how I used something from the current dungeon/adventure to weave it into the next, so everything feels nice and connected and alive. They go into the trophy room. They don't really ever end up messing with the trophy animals. So Brad lists the trophy animals, a bobcat, an owlbear, and a giant shrew. He doesn't provide stats for them. These things they can come alive based on certain things that happen. However, these are basic monsters and found in the referee's tome or the OSE rules. So not a big deal that there's no stats, although it would have been nice just to have a little stat block down here. And there is a lot of white space on this page. I feel like that could have been utilized a little bit, but not that big of a deal, especially since it didn't even end up happening anyways. They never mess with the orb. Even after later, the magic user uses detect magic and sees that the orb is magic, but they don't ever have time to actually mess with it or try and take it or anything like that. He goes into Fabien's bedroom, finds the robe of the wizard, which turns the wearer into to have the appearance of Fabien, which they actually don't ever use to their advantage, although there are many ways that they can in the module. It just never really comes up. So the only time that I think that's really going to matter is when Equinox inevitably finds the party, whenever that is. If the magic user or someone is still wearing that robe, Equinox will be confused why Fabien is with them, because Equinox at this point doesn't know that Fabien is dead. He will have known that the island crashed, because that does happen at the end of the adventure, but he won't know that Fabien is dead necessarily. So that could play into what happens with that. But I guess we will see. And they do find this cigar box full of wands, and they figure out that there is one good wand in there, though they don't know what it does. Ironically, they use detect magic to realize that the wand of magic detection is magical and not inert. The next room they explore is the key room. They don't really fall for any of the red herrings, all of the keys and the crates of keys. It takes a little bit of prompting from me, but they eventually figure out that the key-shaped door could be used as a key. They are kind of on the lookout for something that would fit in that door to the control room, as is described in Area 1. So they take it off its hinges and go bring it over to the wardrobe and shrink it down, as well as they do discover the crystal key here, although they never access Fabien's lounge. They don't have time to explore the entirety of the island adventure, which as a side point is interesting. And I do like that they don't get a chance to explore every single aspect of the dungeon. I think a completionist mindset when it comes toward dungeon exploration can be a little bit tedious at times. So the fact that this adventure really limits them on that and discourages completionist play behavior is quite fun and interesting, because they're always going to be... I like my players coming away from a delve or an adventure knowing that there are some things that they missed or probably missed, and they'll always ask me, "Oh, what did we miss? That was really cool." And sometimes I'll tell them, sometimes I won't. But yeah, that's a great aspect. I'm not sad at all that there were rooms in here that they didn't get to interact with, because I think that's part of dungeon exploration, and then that's part of adventuring. I think it's okay that they're not going to find everything, because no two adventures are going to be the same. That's kind of the whole point of tabletop role-playing games. So they figure out the key room and they gain access to the control room. Describe all the controls here. They write that all down. They finally discover the path from through the conduit here that leads into the kind of inside of the atelier, these little back walls, and they decide to shrink down the dwarf to access one of those. He does. He goes down in there. That's when he meets Nima. He realizes he needs to help Nima. Nima explains what's going on. They're being attacked by the dream gremlins. The shield wall of rats is holding the wall in the room on the other side of the door. So they kind of all come back out, understand the scenario, and they mean to shrink down to similar size and go heal Nima and assist with the battle of the rats. At one point, they do vent the kitchen as well as disable the statues. I believe they do that as soon as they get in the control room. So once they vented the kitchen, the elementals vanish or are, disposed of into the stratosphere. And they know that this is the engine room because they have the map of the Atelier, but it's wizard locked. So I described like the door like doesn't even budge like a millimeter, and they don't really understand necessarily that I'm telegraphing that it's magically immovable, but they do understand that it's not simply going to be picked by a lock. So they figure that they have to get around that some way. No one has a knock spell or anything at this point, so they do need to figure out another way around. That's when they all shrink down. They go help Nima, and then they have the big battle in area 15, I believe it is, battlefield. So this was honestly the biggest lull in the adventure. The combat is a little large for the system. Maybe I should have used some sort of mass combat rules, but 15 dream gremlins, 6 shield rats, not including Nima, the players, the retainers. It was a little much, especially because the dream gremlins basically got steamrolled. Despite me describing the wooden defense tower that has this like witch's hand that shoots missiles, nobody cared about that at all. Like the players did not mean to take it or use it. I described it once and they didn't ask a single question or even approach it. So I don't know. I feel like the interactivity here could have been a little bit better. I don't have an idea for it, but this was kind of just a bit of a slog compared to the rest of the adventure, which was, as I said, really well done all the way across the board. So once they kill these dream gremlins, the rest of the shield rats hold the line. They agree to give the adventurers passage, escorted by Nima, so that they can finish clearing out the rest of the dream gremlins that are in the engine room. So they enter the severed hose room here and try to figure out what to do with the hose. The highest level character, the thief, immediately sticks his hand into the magical liquid that is coming out of the severed hose and tries to splash it into one of their lit torches, which just to see if it's flammable. And then I make him say versus spells, so they realize that he passes, but they realize that stuff is dangerous. So they're trying to infer some sort of creative solution to repair the damaged hose. They haven't discovered the like super glue that is in the lab area of the dungeon. No one has a sewing kit, so they aim to cauterize closed the hose, which I describe the hose as being rubber, and I give it to them. I feel like that's a fair solution for that, for what little I know about hoses and rubber. So they do realize it's dangerous though, so they essentially just convince 2 of the shield wall rats to press the hoses together and don't tell them that it's dangerous and that something might happen, which I don't think the rats would necessarily have any reason to suspect that it would be dangerous. I didn't take Fabien for the type that would, warn his familiars to not touch things like that. So they obey because they are aligned with the players in this way. They don't want their island to fall. They still think Fabien is alive for all they know. The reason that I haven't mentioned that they've thought that the Magic-User player wearing the robe of the wizard is Fabien is because the Magic-User chose to stay back while the rest of the party, the entire rest of the party, went in with the rats, and that was just happenstance, really. He just knew that he wouldn't really be that useful in combat and wanted to continue exploring the rest of the dungeon while they were fighting. So he ends up reading Fabien's memoirs and discovering the magician's apprentices room and the spell book there, as well as finds one of the arcane spell scrolls, which ironically, I believe he actually finds the one that has the knock spell on it, which would have been useful, but they didn't have read magic ready memorized. So unfortunately, they are not able to figure that out. So they convince the rats to hold the hose while they cauterize it. Both of the rats fail their saves against spells. One of the rat's fingers rolls a 3, fingers turn to knives. The other rat has the duplicate appear with a different alignment, and they fight to the death. So he fends him off pretty easily with the help of the players, is a little freaked out, and everyone continues on their way. So they squeeze by through the conduit here over to the engine room. They get there. I described the djinn in this giant glass tank. Everyone's still miniature sized. There's 9 gremlins in the room that are attempting to break the tank and fuck up the engine even more. So that happens. They, notice the players notice the gremlins. There's a bit of a combat. Thief gets a couple backstabs off. It's not really a problem. They slay the rest of the gremlins without issue. So now we've got this entire party of player characters shrunk down to 2 inches in the engine room on one side of the door, and the magic user full size on the other side of that door, not able to do anything until full power is restored. The only thing to do at this point is to clean the engine, which I rule that they can do as they're tiny. It's just going to take a very long time because they're so small. So since the gremlins were able to get up there, I figure the players are also able to get up there. It would make sense. And plus they have a thief and rope and things of that nature. So they climb their way up onto the engine and have the entire party except for the magic user. And at some point, the thief's retainer, who is an assassin, also went back out. And while the engine is being cleaned, they opt to go and explore the lab. So all the players are cleaning the engine, shrunk down, little mini guys, magic user, assassin going to explore the lab, which is filled with pools of caustic acid. They open up the chest, find a bunch of coins. They find the labeled potions, which they stow. And at this point, and something very interesting happens, we finally advance the clock a couple times and we get to number 3, earthquake, save versus paralysis or fall prone and drop held items. Now this is very interesting because falling prone for the players that are cleaning the engine means falling off of the engine. And since they're so small, that's a huge distance. Now I rule that if they fail, and I tell them this right off the bat, I say, look, if you fail your save versus paralysis and you fall off the engine, you're going to fall 1 to 60 feet or the equivalent of feet if you were full size. And so that means you're basically going to take 1d6 to 66 points of damage. Unfortunately, the high level thief and the elf and the fighter, who are both level 2, and the thief is level 6, I believe, all fail their save. There's a dwarf and a knight that succeed, so they don't fall. But everyone, those other ones, thief, elf, fighter, fail their save. They fall off the engine. They roll too high on their fall damage, and they die. All 3 of them, which was absolutely massive. There's a lot of not tension, but it was just a very dramatic moment because this is the first time in my campaign with these. I think this is the first time that any of these players have ever had a D&D character die, which was really interesting. And it was actually really exciting because, in hindsight, we had talked about like this moment and how it changed the feel of the campaign and it changed the scope of it. And it made everything just seem a lot more dangerous. And, there was just, they had all these ideas and it just changed a lot of things context wise. And it was super interesting to have that happen. So the dwarf and the fighter mourn the loss of their friends, continue cleaning the engine. The player that is playing the magic user immediately knows what he has to do, which is approach the djinn and wish that the earthquake never happened. So the engine starts back up, the island is up and running. At this point, this wizard player has a massive island under his control. And instead of utilizing that and everyone just rolling up characters, because that's one of the consequences of your campaign with introducing this adventure is if your players do everything right and they succeed, they get this massive floating island that maybe there are going to be people coming for it that are more powerful than them at a later date, but that's kind of up to you and up to them. But this island can float around everywhere. It can turn invisible. It's like the ultimate player base. And it has a lot of really cool things that it can just innately do because it's powered by the djinn. So instead of staying with the status quo, the second level or third level at this point magic user sacrifices access to this crazy island in order to save his friends or his friends' characters, what have you. So he hoists the djinn out of the tank. The djinn thanks him for helping him, grants him a single favor. And I just go off of the greater djinn rules for OSE found in the referee's tome, where the greater djinn can grant one wish. I believe it's once a day. And the definition of a wish is you can wish for something reasonable. The wishing that like a blow never happened is an option. I give that to them as an example, and they choose to wish that the earthquake or the, whatever the malfunction of the engine that caused the earthquake never happened. I see that as reasonable. So we rule that all of the player characters that fell to their death or took damage otherwise come back to life in their miniature form. The djinn says thanks again, bursts through the wall, leaves the island, at which point the island starts sinking because it is now not powered by anything. Everything powers down, or at least everything on this controls list. I did rule that the fire pole down from the rotunda still is active because it doesn't seem to be controlled by the controls list here, as well as the wardrobe in order to go from miniature size up to large size again. Although, again, they thought that these effects were permanent. They didn't necessarily have to do that. So they have literally a minute. It says that, so 6 rounds, and they still have so much. They have a huge pile of gold in the wardrobe room. Someone has to go up and activate the pole so they can escape, and they have no time to grab anything else, which is unfortunate because there's some cool treasure in this. There's a bag of holding hidden in the control room, which they never find. There's a bunch of cool items. There's a wand of fireball in the kitchen that activates this incinerate garbage function. So anyways, the only thing they have time to do, and they barely have time to do it, is stuff their pockets with as much gold as they can, since it's right next to the hole that exits the island. They have a shovel on them. They just shovel the rest of the gold out within like 20 seconds. And then they all get on the fire pole, slide down to the base, and they just watch this huge island float. It kind of like crashes down like a plane would, like some sort of aircraft that has wings. and it goes very far off into the distance as it slowly goes down and picks up speed and crashes very close to where the next town was, which is we'll get into on our next session. But yeah, so they come back. They realize at this point they have been robbed of all of their horses as well as the dragon. They have no idea what's up with that. They have some gold, some potions, a scroll, a spell book, a robe that makes them look like someone else. And that's about it. So all in all, this was really fun. This was a really good adventure. Very impressed with Brad's writing. I like this a lot more than, say, The Hole in the Oak. I think that, there's just a lot of logic to Brad's dungeon design, and everything pretty much has a purpose. And if it doesn't have a purpose, then its purpose is to distract, which is a purpose in of itself, but not in an annoying, meaningless way, and in a way that is like random and doesn't make sense. Good job, Brad. I am looking forward to playing the other adventures in this book. I'm probably going to play The Sinister Secret of Peacock Point at some point, and possibly the Dreaming Caldera as well, since that seems pretty cool. So that is all for now. Thank you very much. Have a good day.